Okay, I think the recording is going now.
Sweet, sweet. How's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
Well, tired. It's been a day.
I
Well,
I bet. Are you out like doing a magazine story for Game Informer at the moment or
I mean, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like almost the constant. Uh,
okay.
like I have one left that I need to work on, but most of my stuff is done already. We have our deadline next week for the issue we're working on, so
Gotcha.
everyone's kind of in that mode of like finishing up what we got. So most of them, thankfully, I only have one left that I need to start, and it's really dependent on if a developer gets back to me in a timely manner so that I can actually write it.
Is that like a common thing you have to rely on basically? Do you like hear back from developers or not hear back often?
Usually, it depends. I'd say by and large, at least, this is me personally. People usually get back to me either sooner or later. Everyone's different. Sometimes it's later than you might like, and then sometimes it doesn't come back the way you might want it to come back. Like, oh, this is less than what we discussed, but it's too late, so we got to work with it. Or sometimes in the case of, like, we'll say Nintendo, who are notoriously hard to get a hold of, no matter who you are. When they don't want to talk about something, they're not going to talk about it. You know,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
you shoot your shot of like, it'd be nice to talk to somebody about this game that they're making, but otherwise, we'll just have to use what we have. you know.
Yeah. That sounds about right.
Yeah. So you're in Minneapolis.
Yeah, yep. I'm at the University of Minnesota currently, the Hubbard School of Journalism and Mass Communication, all that.
Nice. How long you been there?
This is my first semester at Hubbard and third year at the University of Minnesota.
Okay. You going for a bachelor's or master's?
Bachelor's, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
We'll see
Nice.
though. Maybe a master's, but for now the plan is bachelor's. Yeah.
One step at a time.
Yeah, pretty much.
Exactly. Okay. Nice. So you're local. You can go hang out with the GI crew. Have you met any of them, or?
No, no, nothing like that yet.
Okay. I know we're moving into a new office in the near future. So,
Oh, really?
yep, that is pretty much done. I mean, like, in terms of like where we're gonna be, it's just actually setting it up and stuff like that. I know they want to get in there around November-ish, like late November. Just
Hmm.
trying to like nail that down. But I know that they've already toured it and stuff like a couple weeks ago and whatever. I sent them a
Um,
cardboard cutout of myself to bring with them.
they
It's
can put it where you want your desk.
exactly like, just pretend I'm here in spirit.
um, did the did like COVID help at all with moving offices or make that harder?
From what I understand, because they were out of the office, and then they decided, or GameStop decided, one of the two, that they're like, oh, we're just gonna ditch the old office because, like, from what I heard, the rent there was like absurd anyway. So this
Oh, yeah.
kind of gave them an excuse to be like, well, we're not even using this and have it for months now. Let's just get rid of it and then start fresh when we can go back to an office. So, like, you know, it was smart. Like, Reiner took that time to kind of like drive around to a ton of places to look at stuff, and then just kind of kept us posted throughout the whole thing of like, hey, what do you think of this place? Because he's trying to get a gauge of like location and where everyone is and what everyone's comfortable in terms of commute. Like, is this a good distance for everybody, et cetera, et cetera. So it was like kind of sad because, like, in the sense of like that, their old office, they've been there forever. Like, I was lucky enough to work in it when I was an intern, so at least I
Mm.
have the memories of being in there and stuff like that, and like the old vault and all that stuff. I know Liana, she was like one of the few new, like, of our batch that did not intern, so she didn't get to see it. Um, so it's like that. Oh man, it's weird that that old office is just gone somewhat unceremoniously. But it's like, but I get it. It makes sense. And everything about that we've seen of the new one looks phenomenal. Like, I can't wait till it's up and running, and then we can show everyone what it is. Because from what we've already seen, we're like, okay. As Ben Hansen would say, you put your hands back and say, I could get used to this.
um so for the interview, just let me know if you need to end it at any time. That's perfectly fine. And if there's any question you don't want to answer, just let me know.
Okay.
So to start with, how old are you?
I'm 33, so soon to be 34 next month.
Would you consider yourself like, are you on the younger side for game journalists as far as you know?
I feel like it's weird because I felt like I was on the older side. Because when I interned, it was 2015 and I was like 28 or 29, like late 20s. And like, from what I understand, most of the interns were like in their early 20s. So it's like, oh man, am I like, am I too late for this? Or like, you know what I mean? It felt weird. But like, am I like the kid that got held back too many times? And like, I'm in there with the kindergartners basically. And I'm like, you should be in 4th grade by now. But I mean, I think the only other intern that was older than me that I know of was Ian Bedreau, who writes for PC Games In now. I think he was older than me when he was an intern. But yeah, I guess I'm like the average age, depending on generation, right? Because it feels like a lot of the established people are like either my age or older, right? But in terms of like, I guess, making it quote unquote, like I got known in my 30s as opposed to maybe my early to mid 20s. So I guess, I don't know. It's weird, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Age is always like a weird thing for people, I think. Yeah.
I know amongst us the new band, like me, Blake Hester, Jake Wasau, Van Aken, Liana, who's no longer with us, but like Liana and I are the same age. And her and I were like everyone else, even like were like in their 20s, mid 20s, or are, and we were just like, oh, when we kind of gradually found out how old we all were like, oh, like Liana and I are like the oldest here, like, oh, like significantly so, like, oh, okay, well, I guess we'll grapple with that for a bit.
So your career getting to like how long your Game Informer blurbs says you've been writing about games for like 10 years. When did you start doing that? And like, did you start as a hobby or professionally?
Oh, it's totally a hobby. It was in 2011. I went to college to study game design because at the time, and not even that time really, because I graduated high school in 06. And it was one of those things where like, I didn't know what I wanted to do basically. Like, everything you don't want to do. So it's like, oh, okay, I don't know. Like, because I've always been a big proponent of like, well, I want to do something that I actually care about and not just for the money. Because like, I don't want to be one of those people that are like miserable at their jobs. And like, even if it pays well, it's like, I don't care about what I'm doing. So I kind of took my time going through like school. Like I did like 2 years of community college. I was like, well, let me get my basic academic stuff out the way that I'm gonna have to do no matter what, for like a fraction of the price and no debt. And then eventually decided to do game design. So I was like, okay, like the two things I'm like most passionate about are games and wrestling. So either I got to get into the game industry somehow or become a wrestler. That's literally it. So yeah, I was like, oh, it's weird because I grew up reading game magazines. Like Game Informer was like my number one forever, and I was subscribed to them since like the early 2000s. And it was like, I always read that in the back of my mind. It's like, that's a cool job. And I was always good at like writing, and especially like creative writing and stuff. But it didn't like click to like, why don't you just do that for some reason? And I'm always like, why didn't I come to that conclusion sooner? Could have saved some time. But hey, but I did went to the Art Institute, Fort Lauderdale, in Florida, and did about it was like a bachelor's program. And I'd say about like the second year in was because I was part of a wrestling forum at the time, but like most forums, it had sub forums for like everything else, and including gaming. And some people would write like their own reviews and stuff like that. And then that's kind of, I was like, oh, like I kind of got that itch of like it started to click. Like, what if I just did that and then just said like, oh, I'll give it a shot. So the first game I reviewed ever was Marvel vs. Capcom 3, which had just come out at the time. And it was weird because, like, I wasn't ever formally trained or anything like that. But it's like you read enough reviews over the years that you almost kind of know just via osmosis, like what to do, kind of, and like how to go about this. And so I just kind of did. And I remember being super nervous, but then like everything you posted, and then I got like people were like, "Hey, this is really good job." And it's like, really, you like me? Okay. um so I just did that for a while. Like I would just do random reviews on that forum, and then eventually, not too long after that, I started my blog on a site called Hub Pages. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's basically like a personal blog that you can technically make money on through like Google AdSense. uh and that's the only, I was like, oh, that's a good place because I can write on my own and then potentially get paid for this. I've gotten paid exactly once in the 10 years that it's still up and I just forget it exists. But I remember I got a $50 check or like a deposit like 2 years ago. I was like, oh, this finally paid off. All those those 0.2 cents views paid off. But I had that for like 2 years and just wrote a ton of reviews and features and just dumb stuff. And like it's funny because I straight up ripped Game Informer's review scale, like scoring system, the bullet points, like because that was what I knew best. And I realized at that point that that's where I wanted to be. So it was almost like I should practice this now, because then if I get hired, I already know what to do and I can show it off like, yo, I already been writing you like you guys forever.
Did that pay off for you?
I guess it did. Even though I don't, I definitely never sent them samples from those days, so I don't think they ever saw that stuff. But in a way, it was like, okay, at least I kind of already been aping you guys. And it was kind of from there because like I did it for 2 years, and then I got my first like professional gig at this startup site. It's not around anymore, but it was called Gamer Attitude, and it was out of the UK. And it was like a dude, and like, and you might have some experience being a journalism major. If you ever try to write for like smaller people, it's always the thing of like, yo, we're starting a site, and we're looking for writers, man, that are passionate. We can't pay you, but like, you get paid in exposure, quote unquote, all that good stuff, right? Which I mean is fine. Like I wanted it because it's like, oh, I want to get to that next level. But even in 2012 or whatever, it was still like really unclear how you get into this industry, which is kind of wild in hindsight, right? Because it's like, okay, like do I need a journalism major? Because I definitely don't have any of that. And it's like I've just kind of been teaching myself as I've been going. So when I started writing there, that was my first time learning how to like communicate with PR and asking companies for code. And at that time, there is a book that was published called oh man, it's not Game Over. That's the Mario book. Critical Path by a seasoned journalist, game journalist named Dan Amarich. I don't know how you pronounce his last name, but it's funny. I was listening. He was on the Game Informer show back when Matt Helgelson used to run it. And he came on to talk about his book, and it was literally exactly what I needed. Of like, hey, no one ever tells you how to get into this industry. Here's how you do it, because I've been doing it forever. And I like bought that so fast. Like, yes, like I want like a roadmap. Like, how does this work, basically? And I like devoured that thing, and like it runs through everything. Of like, one, it grounds the expectation of what this job is. Of like, dispelling the myth, like, hey, just sit around and play video games all day and it's happy fun times at all time. I mean, it can be that, but like, there's obviously a lot of work too. And like he emphasized, like you really need to be a great writer first that just happens to like games, and not the other way around. Because everybody likes games, but can you string a sentence together? And so I was like, okay, I got that down. It's good. But like, I like that combined with this first place where I kind of got firsthand like experience with doing the more professional elements of this job. That was super helpful. And that ultimately was my work there was what got me the internship at GI. And then, that was a whole other next level thing, right? Because now you're like there. It's like, I'm like, I did it. Like, I'm here. Like, it's temporary, but I'm here. And then, being in the office with them, and then again, being someone that grew up reading the magazine and like watching, like I watched Replay when it debuted and watched every week and all that stuff. And I remember I mailed a thing into Reiner that got on Replay where I made a fucking dumb bingo card of Dan Reichert, and then he actually threw it on air, and I was like, oh my god, he put my stupid bingo card making fun of Dan Reichert. I didn't expect that. I'm like, oh, this is great. And then, just being able to like share a coffee with him in the break room, I was like, this is like, trying not to nerd out, like, oh, they're like, I'm cool, but inside you're like, this is crazy. So yeah. Oh, this feels like a long drawn out response to your question.
No worries, no worries. It's for a profile, right? So I mean, whatever works.
Okay. I was like, feel free to cut me off. But yeah, so that the internship was like 3 months. It was like fall. And that was invaluable, getting especially in terms of critique, like, which every writer should seek out, even if it's not always fun. It always stings when you get edits back and it's like marked up like it just got stabbed in a murder, and you're like, and then you just think like, I am a terrible writer, I guess. But going through all of that and getting to brush shoulders with those guys and doing this at the highest level like that, like I learned so much from that. And I had never, at that point, I'd never freelanced at all, like actual freelancing. I wrote for that site, but I had never done real legit freelancing. I didn't really learn what that was until I was there, because one of the other interns, a guy named Joseph Newt, who writes for IGN and does a lot of cool stuff, he was a journalist. Like he wrote for like his newspaper back home and stuff, and was like the I'm on the ground chasing leads guy. And I was just like, I'm the guy that just loves to write. But we were cool. We're still good friends to this day. He's awesome. But like talking to him was where I learned like, okay, freelancing, okay, because I had to start doing that after I left. And so I did. I was never like a prolific freelancer or anything like that. Like I got some stuff, I pitched, I got some stuff picked up. I was never like on IGN or GameSpot, despite my best efforts. But I got like a thing on Paste once and some other smaller sites. I worked a lot with Extra Life, which is where Jack Gardner, friend of GI, and also for a long time she was like head of Extra Life. Like her and I became friends and worked really closely. That was when I got to go to E3 for the first time the following year, and then went everywhere, or went every year up to when it stopped. Unceremoniously stopped. And yeah, it was kind of at that point, like the year since then, just trying to get better, and like I kind of focused just on trying to learn as many different things, because it's at the point now where you almost can't just be a pure journalist. You kind of have to be everything, right? Like you kind of have to be a personality, because a lot of this job is like on camera now and podcast. And if you want to get hired, like you want to make yourself as attractive as possible. And that was always my thing, is like I want to prove to everyone that I can do anything. So like I taught myself how to podcast and like launched a few different podcasts. And like I'm not an audio guy at all. I don't know any of this stuff. I just Google's your friend, right?
Yeah, and you just like throw yourself out there, right?
Yeah, which is scary, right? But you have to do it. It's like you have to. I'm like the shyest dude ever, and like you have to put your way in front of things to make stuff happen, because otherwise you won't get anywhere. And I taught myself how to stream. I started a YouTube channel and taught myself how to do video editing and capture gameplay. Like everything that you see people doing now, I just did it. And, it wasn't always easy. And there were certainly moments of like like any writer or any creative in general, like, those moments of like, oh, I'm terrible, imposter syndrome, depression, like every, like running the gamut of every high and low that comes with this stuff, especially as a freelancer, because it's just not, it's not consistent, right? At least usually, unless you're really lucky. But you gotta have to be persistent about it. And on top of working a full time or not full or like part-time jobs, and then like coming home after like a long shift and then hopping to do this stuff, like, all right, I gotta record or I gotta play this game because I want to review it and all that stuff. That was like my life for pretty much 5 years up to when I got hired here. It was just go, go, go. No days off almost. So
Yeah. Is that so like the no days off kind of thing? Is that like how it works for games journalism too? Like because you want to keep on top, like the 24-hour news cycle kind of thing, right? Is it like that at all for games journalism?
I don't know about other sites. GI at least, no. Like it's weird. Like it's something that I've had to, and I still kind of struggle to come down from now that I'm here. Now that I have it, I have the thing that I was chasing so desperately for years, that I don't have to juggle two jobs anymore. Like this is just it. This is my job. So I can, when I'm done here, I can do anything else. I don't have to worry about like, I got to go edit a podcast. And I was like, oh, I did that earlier. Okay. So in a way, it's honestly a break for me. Especially like just the other perks of like, being owned by GameStop is obviously like a big corporate thing. I having that, being in a privileged position to be like, oh, I make a comfortable amount of money that I can have a comfortable living doing what I love and have benefits and stuff, which I never had benefits before this job, any job I've ever had. So that's something if I got it's like, oh, I can go to the doctor. Oh, okay. It's like I never used it. Like I've always been lucky, or I never get sick. But now it's like I can now if that happens. Cool. But like, it hasn't changed much for me because I was always kind of trying to keep an ear on things because you kind of have to, right? If you, and in a way you want to, because if you're like an enthusiast for this, you always want to know what's happening. And so that didn't really change because I just kind of always conditioned myself to do that anyway. Like the only reason I started a Twitter account was to follow the industry because that was like when the news cycle started to shift to there.
Mm.
And it was just like, oh, I should be there, I guess, right? Like it wasn't to socialize stuff. Like that didn't even happen until after my internship because I didn't have anyone follow me because I wasn't anybody. And then when the internship started, now people are like, oh, this guy, let's follow him. And it was like this nerve-wracking thing of like, oh God, like now people are watching me. That's not why I started this. But okay. But yeah, like I like you can like you keep stuff in mind and you listen, and it helps because you get to a point where people just send stuff to you now and you don't have to go out of your way to listen because like you get press releases, or as I've been here a year now, like a year literally, like this week. And I've noticed like, oh, my inbox fills up more and more and more because people are used to you now and they're like, hey, check me out, or you want to look at this and stuff. So I almost don't have to look sometimes because it'll just come to me, which is kind of nice. But it's a lot of like filtering out some stuff too of like, we're not going to write about every little thing that comes. Because some stuff either your audience and what they're going to care about. So you're like, I don't know about this mobile game. Our audience isn't super into mobile games unless it's something really cool or different, right? Or esports or whatever it might be. Every outlet has a different audience and knows what they're into. So it's like learning what to filter out, what can you pass on, because there's only so many hours in a day, and then especially because we're trying to be as personality driven instead of just pure news cycle, right? Because people would probably look more at like features and stuff, or opinion pieces, or something fun, like something creative like that, instead of just like, I'm going to regurgitate a press release and here it is.
Yes. So the personality side of things, so that's like carried over for you a lot, right? Because you stream for Game Informer, right? Occasionally, like you've been doing the
Ever Awake
Um,
now.
yeah, the replay for Demon Souls, right?
Yeah.
And then like you I I read your article like why Super Smash Bros doesn't have too many anime sword fighters, like that kind of thing.
Oh, that horrible Hydra that has that continues to spam my notifications because people are still fighting about that somehow.
Is that a thing you deal with like a lot with journalism? Like people maybe not harassing, but like vitriolic reactions, I suppose.
I'd say in this industry for sure, because you know how gamers are. It's an opinion. I mean, that's right. Like, right, you know, even when you're like, I'm not a person that's ever been, and I'm not a person that tries to seek attention or like hot takes. Like, I'm not even like, I'm probably one of the quietest people on Twitter. I just don't put myself out there that way. Like outside of sharing my work or maybe a snarky comment, like that's kind of all you'll hear from me. And so like when it does happen, like this thing, I knew it was going to be a thing because I know how the Smash community is, right? I didn't write it intentionally to anger them, but I had like a real point that had always bugged me. And I was like, you know what? This is a good time to finally get this out. Like I know this is going to kick the hornet's nest, but I don't care because I feel like I'm right, but I welcome any healthy debate. I'm not going to get fat because I know this community, but we'll see what happens. But yeah, I mean, you know, you've seen things like especially like stuff like Gamergate and whatever. Like gamers can be terrible people. I mean, anyone can be a terrible person, but you know, people care a little too much about the dumbest things, and everyone taking opinions as gospel and forgetting like, hey, this is just one person's opinion. If I say this game sucks in my review that you think is cool, I'm not trying to say that your opinion is wrong. I'm just saying this is my experience. This is where I'm at with it. I'm letting you know and articulating why that is. You can take it or leave it. Just, you know, this is a heads up. So I mean, I haven't gotten like I've only gotten like in the year that I've been here, remarkably, like a handful of emails that have ever been like outward, like I hate you. I can't believe you said this or something, you know. And you know, but those pretty much you just hit delete on immediately because again, it's nothing constructive. It's literally just like you suck. You're like, okay. So it's something to keep in mind for sure, especially unfortunately if you're a woman or like a minority. Like I've known or I have, you know, female writers that get 3 times as much hate for like nothing, and seemingly because, you know, whether the people that send that stuff want to admit it or not, it's like there's something, it's because they're female, right? Like you hold them to an unfair standard because I don't know why. That's, you know, for you to figure out. But if I had to guess, there's some secret sexism there, whether it's blatant or just, you know, like underlying of like, for whatever reason, I put this person under a microscope more than just like straight white male journalist guy. Same for like minorities too. Like actually, probably the thing I got the most like vitriolic response, even more so than the Smash thing, was in January. I think, yeah, it was January of this year. I wrote a list of upcoming games that starred protagonists of color, and boy, did that blow up in some real negative ways, which I kind of had a feeling going in. And you know, I wrote it with the best intentions, and I put it even in the intro, like, hey, you know, this is something when I was growing up, I would either wonder about like, how come there's no games that have like a black dude, or like you really have to look for those, you know, and or like I would have family members that didn't even care about games that would ask sometimes, and so it's like, oh well, maybe I'll kind of like, you know, do everyone else like a solid and be like, hey, here's some, you don't have to look, I found a bunch, and I got like accused of being a racist because of it, which is, I think literally the only time in my life I've ever been called a racist.
Jesus.
I was like, this is interesting. Yeah, like it's funny when you see an article that has over 100 comments, you're like, it's probably not for a good reason.
Is that something that like is hard to deal with? Like, do you feel nervous when you're like writing a piece that you think will bring you like hate? Do you just like write it because you're like, I need or like want to do this?
No, it's weird. I get nervous still when I publish something, but not for that reason. It's more for the like, I hope this is good. And
Mm.
like, I hope I don't look like a bad writer kind of a way. Like, oh, I wrote this review. I hope I did this game justice, or I hope I got my points across. Cause like, it's more like I almost want to impress my peers more than the average reader, you know, because that's kind of what I was always chasing. Because it's like at the end of the day, you know, not that I don't value the opinions of like the average reader, but like for me, it's like if my peers say it's okay, then I don't care what you say. If like Greg Miller or Reiner is like, hey, that was great, I'm like, oh, thank God. Okay. I don't suck at this. So, but yeah, so like and that's always been my thing in general. It's like I don't really care what people think in that sense of like, oh, I put like an opinion piece or something like that, like if I'm gonna make people mad, because it's like, well, I'm just being honest. Like I'm just being me. And like for those kind of articles, like the people of color one, I had a feeling I was like, oh, this will probably ruffle some feathers, but I don't care. Because like that's not, I'm not doing this to, it's weird. So I'm trying to think of like, it's like I'm not doing this because it's like I don't want to make it seem like again, like I'm not seeking heat or anything like that. Like because I've known writers that, you know, are kind of like shock jock, like, yeah, I'm the edge lord, I'm, you know, pissing everybody off. Like I'm definitely not that guy. But I guess I just don't care. I think because you realize when enough of those responses are just so nonsense that you're like, why would I devote energy to being upset over this like dumb thing? Like this person doesn't even make sense with what they're saying. Or you could just tell like they're just mad. Like I don't know why they're upset. They're just angry. And it's not my job to figure out why they're mad. It's like, I'm sorry you took this completely the wrong way, but I'm not gonna let you get to me. Like I've never been bothered by people calling me names or anything like that. So yeah, I guess the short answer is it's like, I don't care.
That's probably a healthy
Yeah.
way to view it.
You kind of have to though, right? Unfortunately, to get into this work, you kind of have to come in with thick skin because, you know, once a very public facing job, you have to be able to take criticism, one from your peers and then as well as your readers, you know, the readers that do have like constructive things to say about your work. But even then, like if you can't handle, you know, it sucks that you should have to handle this, but if you can't handle like people just being mean just to be mean or trolls, then it gets rough. And I've known people that have left this line of work because they got tired of it, you know, which I don't blame them. It's not for everyone, and no one should have to put up with being harassed over a top 10 list. Right. So yeah, it's like an unfortunate prerequisite for the job, but it's kind of necessary at this point because again, if you're in this job, then you're probably a hardcore gamer, which means you're probably aware of how our like our culture can be sometimes, like the dark parts of it.
Mm.
Mm.
Um, would you say so? Would you say that like game journalism is more personality driven than like other forms of like journalism? So you need to like kind of keep that in mind when you go for the job and when you do the job, like being a public figure of sorts.
It's weird because it's like since I've never done it in any other field like sports or anything like that, it's hard to compare. But even looking at like, so I'm not a sports guy, but you watch like ESPN, it's like those guys that are like on the panels on TV, those guys are ostensibly journalists, right? And they have to be in front of a camera to say the thing that they would probably write about or have written about too, comfortably. So it's like I said, like it definitely doesn't hurt. If I would tell people now if they really want to do this to try to like what I did, like teach yourself, like you know, start a YouTube channel, do a podcast, like get like have as many skills under your belt, because like I said, if you haven't done any of that, not that you can't make it purely as a writer and nothing else, but it's certainly, I think it would help you in the long run, because I think our industry is kind of going more personality driven, because one, like the rise of influencers and stuff, like influencers are almost like neck to neck with journalists in terms of like exposure. Companies like game companies will go to them sometimes before us to show off their games and stuff like that. And they're the interesting thing, right? Because they're not journalists, they're not beholden to the same ethics that we would be. And we've seen where how that can lead to disaster sometimes. And as like, and a lot of them are also like kids, basically, right? Like teenagers, young adults that suddenly have all this exposure in this game. They don't really know what to do with it, so they do some really irresponsible things that no, like even I'm not like I said, I'm not a trained journalist, but like I've learned what not to do. And it's like I wouldn't do that. So, but like they're the biggest things right now, right? And people want that. Like people want to get to know the people that review games and like beyond just like a page. And so like sites like Giant Bomb, which has always been very personality driven success with that. We've Game Informer's always had videos and stuff like that, but if you've noticed, we've upped that like streams and
Yeah,
stuff like
like
that.
Twitch streaming and all that.
Yeah, which something that from what I understand before I got here was always something we wanted to do. Like finally did it when we got here. And yeah, like I think it's a good compliment to just like the day-to-day news to have like I don't know, there's something, I guess there's something like you're more engaged when you read a news story and then you see who wrote it and you kind of know a little bit about that person. You're like, oh, I like this guy, or I trust this person, I trust their reporting, or I trust their opinion because I feel like I know them. I know I had that thought when I was a Game Informer reader because I was so engaged in the site of like, oh yeah, Dan wrote that. I like Dan Reichert. Like, that's cool. For some reason, I'm more interested that he wrote this or whatever. So I think it's only going to continue going that way, and not to say that it's going to go like no one's going to become pure influencers. Like the actual like journalism stuff will always be there. I mean, look at Jason Schreier. Like he's like a journalist, and he's got like how many followers?
Yeah.
So I think a balance is important, but it's definitely like that's just what it is now, too. It's not going to go backwards. It's only going to become more personality driven, but like I said, it's going to be more of a balance now.
So would you say that like traditional journalism skills and like training aren't as valuable or necessary to learn before getting into the industry? Are those the kinds of things you would learn like as you go? Because you didn't really have any training in that, right? Compared to like
No,
personality stuff.
like I said, I picked this up as I went, like either just through osmosis or just asking people and whatever. And like I always had like a common sense with it too, of like, well, of course I wouldn't break an embargo. That's an agreement. They said not to do something, and why would I not do that? Or like why would I intentionally misquote anyone or anything like that? That's just wrong. It has nothing to do with like journalism rules. That's just ethically wrong. So again, if you're like early on and you're deciding if you want to get into this, it certainly doesn't hurt. It will only help. But at the same time, if you're like me, where you're like, oh man, I'm in school for this, I screwed up. I have to quit my current degree and become a journalist. Like so many writers, some of the writers that are the biggest, names in the industry, they all come from so many different backgrounds. As long as you can write well, which is the number one thing, it doesn't matter how many times you've beaten Super Mario World and if you know it inside and out, that's cool. But can you write down, your experiences in an interesting and correct way? So yeah, learn how to write first and foremost. Learn, if you want to go to school for journalism, go for it. If nothing else, even if you find that you don't like this industry, you can certainly apply it to other things. But also, like I said, it's definitely not a requirement. You can, there's plenty of people that have done this long enough to where it's almost like they may as well have gone to journalism school because they've got it down. And if you can mentor yourself with someone else, or just watch, just observe, you read enough people, you see what they do, you kind of, like I said, you just kind of pick it up, right?
What is the most like important skill you learned? You would you say?
Learning how to take criticism.
Mm,
I think that's probably every writer's number one thing, right? Because no matter how good you are, you're probably not as good as you think you are, or you can always be better. And I think that's not even just for journal. I think that's for anything, like being willing to never stop learning and to always try to improve your game. I've been, I guess, lucky where like I've never been someone that was like arrogant and didn't think that like oh, my stuff is good. How dare he tell me it's bad? Like I would be nervous. Like I was always the opposite way. Like I was like scared to show people just because like I was just like, oh man, I hope this is good. But like I would never get offended if someone, or still to this day, like we get edits all the time. So if you can get over that humps, I've known artistic people that just cannot take a critique and then that kind of holds themselves back. And I've seen it. It's like you got to be willing to work with people who are better than you. You should want to work with someone that's better than you because that's how you get better. I left a place once because I was the best writer there. It was like one in my journey, because I wrote for different free sites. I wrote for one where I was like the most experienced guy there. I didn't know that coming in, but I figured it out pretty quick. Of like, oh, everyone here could be better. So yeah, like it just, you're gonna get critiqued. It's gonna happen no matter how good you are. You should want that. Like my friend Joe told me, like you should almost crave it, right? Like you should go out of your way to ask, like, no, tell me, like, don't hold back. Tell me how this can be better, because and not to look at edits as or critique as an attack, like, because it never really is unless they're just a jerk, then they're doing it wrong. But like think of it as like, hey, they're trying to turn your already good thing even better. Like they see that this is good, like, oh, but let's do this and it'll be even better. And you're like, oh, okay. And that's the positive way to think of it. So
just not taking necessarily criticism from commenters, I guess.
Yeah, and again, you recognize like, okay, this is like a critique, and you think about it, and like that's always a tricky thing too about like getting advice from multiple people, is learning like what actually should I listen to basically, and what is like garbage, because you never want to lose your voice, right? You always want to. It's the tricky thing, especially when it's coming from people that you do respect and are all telling you different things, and it's that balance. I'm like, what do I take everything they say and apply it, even if it's contradictory, because you're afraid to speak up and you're like, oh, I admire these guys? Or do you just, in least my case, like depending on what it is, of course, you take bits and pieces of everything and then incorporate it while still maintaining your voice or your personality, right? Of like, okay, I think I see what he's saying about this, or I agree with this, and not being afraid to disagree with an edit or a suggestion if you really think that, like, I don't know if but don't, you always want to converse and not confront too, which is also a skill. Never confront, converse, don't yeah. And that comes with like pitching ideas too. If someone pitches you something about a piece, instead of just saying, hey, that's stupid, just say, hey, what if, like, oh, I see what you're saying, but what if we did this instead? Because then you're acknowledging their edit and just offering an alternative. Because then if you say that's stupid and then you don't have an alternative, then you're just looking like a jerk, right? At least have an idea of like, well, what if we did this instead?
So just like lifting each other up rather than like tearing each other down.
Yeah, because unfortunately, there's a lot of that in this industry, even from professionals. You stay on Twitter long enough, you'll even see other journalists tear down each other, which I still don't. I just don't understand why people have to do that. Unfortunately, it's not just readers that can be like that. But I've been around. I'm not going to name names, but I've been around people like either in person, like at E3 or conventions, and then like some writers can be a little insufferable and like snooty and only want to put down others, and which, or like call people out publicly on Twitter, which I still to this day I just do not get that. It's like, if I have a problem with you, I'm just gonna DM you. I don't need an audience for this. It's just between us, like, hey, by the way, I don't need to sick people that like me on you. But people do it anyway. So yeah, you know, just be cool. Just build each other up. Why not? Why do we always just shove people back down? There's plenty of room up top for everybody. We should want more people up here with us, not less. So
What would you say the hardest part of the job is?
hmm, hardest part of the job. It's interesting, actually. I'm trying to think about that. I mean, reviews can be tough, even though that's my favorite part of the job and how I got into this. I think people forget how much or don't realize how much work really goes into those because, I know you're playing a game and that's happy fun time, and it can be if it's good. uh, but if it's bad, then it really feels like work, especially when it's like a really bad long game. You're like, I hate this, but I gotta finish this on a tight deadline, and this is my life for the next week because we got it too late. So we got to try to finish it as fast as possible to hit the embargo and get it up first. And that, yeah, like that. Oh, were you gonna say?
Do you work overtime for like reviews? Like if you have a game that you need to finish and review by an embargo, do you like basically work after hours, like take that home with you and that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's weird. Yeah, like it's technically overtime. It's weird for me because again, that's just what I was doing all the time until this job. At least with Game Informer specifically, they're a lot more mindful about like self-care and all that
Mm.
stuff. Which to me is like that's awesome. But it's like I'm still in that like freelancer, like I gotta spend every waking moment doing this because like I don't know why. That's just where I'm at. Uh so but sometimes it's unavoidable sometimes, right? Like if you get something like Cyberpunks or something of that scale, right? And it comes out in a week and this game's like 100 hours, you're like, you do the math, you're like, can't I can't get through this just in a work day, especially because like that's not the only thing that you're doing is the review. Like you have other responsibilities, either it's news or you're working on other stories and stuff that all going on at the same time. So it becomes shuffling, like, okay, like get this done first or whatever. Like, you're just trying to cardon off your time in a way that you can make it all work. So that, sometimes that is just playing a game. But even in that case, is at least again, sort of Game Informer specifically, like Reiner's super cool about like, hey, I spent this whole weekend playing this game. I'm going to take the next like 2 days off. And I'll be like, okay. Yeah, it's that easy, which I'm still getting used to because every other job I've ever had, taking a day off is like a process. Like I got to tell you a month in advance that I'm not feeling it on Monday. But so like they're always good about taking care of you. Of like they recognize that it's just going to happen because that's the nature of the beast. But also like, hey, if you're gonna do it, please take some days off once you're done to recover. You don't have to come in and work a full day if you don't want to, or we'd rather you just didn't do that. So that balances it out, right? And I don't know if other outlets do. I hope so, but that's one of the cool things about working at GI is that they take care of us there.
Is that what you would say is like one of the biggest differences between Game Informer and like other sites that you've written for?
Yeah, but it's like apples and oranges though, because I haven't written at any other site of this scale full time. If I'd worked at like GameSpot or IGN or Polygon or else, it'd be easier. But like all the other sites I've written for were like I said, those like startup sites where you make no money, get paid in views, brother. So we're like you're just kind of showing up when you want to, basically, right? Or you show up as often as you want, and so it's like it's just not the same. Um, it's different than any other job I've ever had in general. Because, like I said, being able to just kind of dip when I want is very weird. I'm used to it now, but like it took a long time to get there. Of like just watching my coworkers be like, "I'm just leaving. I'm done." Not like in like a bad like I'm done. Just like, yeah, I didn't. I put in what I was gonna do today. I'm gonna dip early. I'm gonna go ride my bike. I'm gonna go, take care of myself, basically, right? And it's like, oh, I can do that. Like what? Okay. And it's like, oh, you're just you're just not going to come in tomorrow? I'm like, oh, okay. As a guy that never, like, I've never taken days off, like, ever, like, unless it was something like I actually had to, like, oh, I have to go somewhere, basically. But like, as someone that never got sick to this day, I've never really been sick. I've never missed anything due to sickness or been hurt, been in the hospital or anything like that. So I'm just not used to taking days off in general. So it's been this wild thing of like, wow, they're so flexible. But I think it's because we earned it, because everyone there knows what they have to do. Like, no one's lazy. Like, everyone knows what their responsibility is when they have to get stuff done. Everyone knows how to schedule themselves and know when things need to be up, and then how to get it up in time that they can afford to, you know, take a day or leave early if they want to, because they've done the math, or they got it done, and they will get it done. You know, right? Like, no one ever misses anything. So that's, you know, it's kind of like a reward for that. And it, you know, I guess it keeps it from being abused, because we've never, at least in the time I've been there, it's never been an issue of like, oh, someone keeps disappearing and their stuff's not getting done. Like, that's never happened or has come close to happening at all. Everyone there works their tail off. So, which is inspiring, because it makes you, like, you're like, oh, okay, like, that productivity rubs off on you. And not that I wasn't a productive person before, but it certainly is kind of inspiring, right?
Mm.
So yeah, and it makes, I guess it's nicer knowing that, like, I can work my butt off, and then I can ask for a day and not be afraid of being told no, or retaliation of any kind, right? Like, hey, I just need a day because I killed myself yesterday getting this thing done.
So it's kind of like, so like your experience working on like freelancing stuff and all of that, it kind of comes into play where you're like basically managing your own time, it sounds like, still.
Yeah. And I guess maybe that makes it a little easier, because, like, you know, like I said, when you're a freelancer, you are your own business. Like, pretty, like, you are your own business. And like, so I was used to having to that self-discipline of setting my own schedules, deadlines, etc., having that motivation, that self-starter kind of like, excuse me, yeah,
No
like, just
worries.
being being a self-starter and whatever. So that has certainly helped with this. Even though there is more structure, there's also like a little bit less structure than you would expect. So it's almost like a perfect marriage of the two, in a way, of like, because I'm someone that needs some degree of structure. Like, it can't be entirely loosey goosey. Even when I was a freelancer, I tried to make it as structured as I could. That's kind of just to keep you on a routine, because that's how you get. That's how a routine, or that's how like a hobby or whatever, it becomes a habit, right? You do it
Mm.
over and over and over, and then you don't have to think about it as much, and then it keeps you working. So yeah, I guess, yeah, it's helped for sure. And it's made me better at it, honestly, because of those, like, those hard deadlines. Like, I've definitely learned how to manage my time better, also just by observing my coworkers who are better at it than me. I think Brian Shea in particular, he's a guy that I think is excellent at managing his time.
Um, do you have any advice for like newcomers to the industry?
Yeah. Um, in addition to what I said about, like, don't be afraid of criticism, you know, seek it out. Uh, thick skin, of course. Um, learn how to write. I think that's the big thing. Like, first and foremost, like, really, like I said in that quote from the book, I love it, because it's like, you know, you want to be a great writer that happens to not like games, not a gamer that thinks writing is a cool job. Uh, yeah, because you're going to be doing more writing than you expect. And you should enjoy it, because that's what you're going to be doing. You should be having a good time. At the same time, don't take yourself too seriously. I've been around so many, like, actual journalists that can be insufferable, and it's to me, in my back of my mind, I'm hearing them go like, oh, like, I wrote about God of War, and again, putting other writers down in the back of my head. I'm like, okay, dude, like, you're not Ernest Hemingway. I mean, let's maybe take it down a notch here. You didn't write The Old Man in the Sea or anything. You wrote this strategy guy. But, so, like, please don't. At the end of the day, we're writing about video games, right? It's supposed to be fun, and informative and passionate, right? It should be passion driven. Like you're sharing your passion with the world effectively, right? So don't take the fun out of it, even though sometimes the industry can try to do that for you. um, like enjoy yourself and surround yourself with good people and just keep practicing. Like I said, try to be as well-rounded as you can. Dip your hand into everything, audio, video, streams. Like learn it, even if you don't like it, at least know how to do it. Because like I said, at this point, to get hired at either here or any of the big places, IGN, GameSpot, Polygon, Eurogamer, wherever, Giant Bomb, if you can be on camera and be entertaining and informative at the same time, and like, and we're not saying that you got to go out there and be like, to use a wrestling reference, you don't have to be The Rock and just like electrify everybody, but just like comfortable, right? Or as comfortable as you can be. And also don't think that everyone that does this is totally comfortable with it. Like, you'd be surprised how many of us are like probably like you, of being like super nervous and timid and, oh boy, I don't know if I'm doing this, as much as it may look like on the other side. Trust me when I tell you this, because I'm one of those people, and I've seen people that I admire that are like, oh wow, they're more erect than I thought, in a good way. So don't think that like you'll never be like them. They're as nervous as you, trust me, and I am too. So yeah, and stick with it. It's hard to get in. It's really hard. It took me basically 10 years to get to this point. It's only gotten harder as outlets have kind of closed and stuff, you know what I mean? Like websites have gone down, and for like, I never forget that I'm in an extremely privileged position. So like I said, I can make a comfortable living doing this. Even people that are like really prominent, some of them are freelancers that are still freelancing. And some do it by choice, like some people just prefer that, but you kind of have to be, you have to be willing to kind of put up with that for a while, pitching, getting and setting your own schedule while also not making a lot of money in the beginning. So definitely have another job, like like a main source of income, and do that on the side in the beginning, because that's what I did, and you're probably gonna have to do. Don't expect quick success, but try to keep yourself, you're gonna get discouraged, it's gonna happen, but try to always keep at it. If you really want it, right? And you'll pull yourself out of those humps. They're gonna happen. There's gonna be times where no one's accepting pitches, or sites don't have budgets to pay you, and you feel like no one notices you, no matter if you wrote this thing that you're proud of, but like nobody looks at it. Like, I've had that so many times where like, oh, I wrote this huge thing and like 10 people saw it. But to me, that was like an accomplishment. Like, whoa, 10. Oh, that's more than usual. Okay. Like, like finding those small victories in there. It's a lot of a mental game. Just try to keep your spirits as high as possible, but also being realistic about it. So yeah, if you can do this job well, if you can make it even like marginally, it's a lot of fun. And there's some really cool people that you'll meet along the way on all sides, whether it's media, in developers, PR, voice actors. Like, there's a lot of cool perks that can come with this line of work. So
for when on your LinkedIn, and like you said this earlier, you worked for Gamer Attitude. Their website is down now. Do you like keep backups of like the stuff you write for these sites to use for like your resume and that kind of thing, just to like prove you were there, with like the day of like web content?
I think I not like actively, like I don't have like screenshots of stuff. For a long time I had a Pressfolio site that kind of archived things up to a point. And then on my personal blog, which is still up actually, even though I haven't touched it since I started at GI, I've like, there's a bunch of links there that I believe are still active. At least they should, because a lot of them, because I wrote for Screen Rant before coming to GI, and Screen Rant is still around last I checked. So but yeah, from like Gamer Attitude, I know they're gone now, and I think they might have come something else. There's another site I wrote for called Gaming Historia that like revamped. It became a different name that I'm forgetting at the moment. I think it's Back to the Gaming. They're technically still around, just under a different URL. So like I remember I visited that site, and it was like, it's like the thing of like logging into your old MySpace. You're like, oh, is this still here? You're like, man, I wrote this years ago. Man, this is terrible. But so some stuff is still up. I wish I could have thought of maybe archiving that early stuff better, but at the time you don't really think about it, especially like getting into it. You're just like, oh wow, I'm just happy to be here. I had never really thought about like down the line if I would want to seal this for preservation forever. So some of that stuff's definitely gone, and that's always the nature of writing for like a small site. So, odds are it probably isn't going to last forever or very long. So I guess keep that in mind too if you're starting anywhere and you work for someone that's like can't pay you, but it's going to be the hot new thing. You'll see. And not that those sites are bad, by the way. I had great experiences. I was lucky where like the heads of all the small sites are all cool and didn't swindle me. Basically, they're very upfront about what they're offering. And even though I know it's a tricky thing when experienced writers say like never write for free, I don't know if I get what they're saying, and I agree to an extent. And you definitely don't want people to take advantage of your time and effort, but at the same time, you kind of you have to get your foot in the door somewhere, right? It's like the chicken and egg situation of like, hey, here's an entry level job that you need 2 years experience. You're like, well, what? How am I supposed to get experience if you don't hire me? Right? So it's like if you want to start a portfolio, like it doesn't hurt to start there if the person knows what they're doing, because like you said, you could get experience doing stuff like on a professional level. You just have to be worried about who you write for, and unfortunately you may have learned the hard way sometimes, but that's how you learn, right? So yeah, don't be afraid to write for free, because you're probably gonna have to do it one way or another, either on a blog or on someone else's site. So that you get the experience of the portfolio that you can show to people that will pay you.
That's really interesting advice, because like, yeah, you generally see people saying like don't write for exposure, but like that's really interesting, just like getting your foot in the door and that kind of thing.
Yeah, because it's like, well, aren't you already writing for exposure in the first place? Even if it's not, I know what they mean when they say exposure, like the people that say like I can't pay you, but I'll pay you in this. But if you're blogging, you're writing for exposure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what's the difference in some way?
Is there a certain like part of the industry you want to cover, or like a story you want to write, or someone in particular you'd like to interview?
Miyamoto is the number one. I mean, that's how I got into games. Like my first system was an NES. Super Mario Brothers was my first game. So in a way, that man's responsible for this. And so he's always been like the one of like, even if I couldn't interview him, like just to be in a room with them or whatever. Like I've been at E3s and I've gotten, I've been lucky enough to meet people I've admired or at least been around them. Like, oh man, that's Hideo Kojima over there. Wow. I've never seen him in person though. He has eluded me. I've seen Reggie and Charles Martinet and other, like I interviewed oh man, one of his right hand dudes, Suzuki, but not him. He's my white whale. And I'm starting to get frayed. He's getting up there in age. I don't want to put like bad juju on him. And it's like, oh, I got to do it sooner or later. And it's always funny. It's like I work with people that have talked to him, so it's like you guys are so lucky. So he's my number one. I don't know how it's gonna happen or when, but like even I want to be there, even if I'm not in doing the interviews. Like, can I just be in the room, please? Can I just be a part of this?
Oh no, sorry, what were you gonna say?
Oh no, that's it. Like him, Hideo Kojima would be cool.
Mm.
What else? Reggie would be cool, even though he's out of the industry now. Let's see. It's weird. I'm really bad about like long-term planning in general. I kind of just I'm kind of a make it up as I go kind of guy. So there aren't like I know some people have like a laundry list of like, I want to do this, this, and this. I have some of that, but I'm generally just like, if something comes to mind or I see something, then it becomes like, oh, I want to do that now. And then I just do it. So yeah, but I'd say those are kind of my like white whales doing something with those people.
Mm. Um, so your GI blurb said that you like grew up obsessively playing games. How would you like, has your perception of gaming changed like with your career? Like at all, I guess? Do you like, I'm assuming you still have like the passion, but like just the way you see games, has that changed drastically at all or?
Yeah, even for this job, you view games under a more critical lens. And I think that's why you get into this in the beginning is once, when you're growing up and you're like passionate about games, and like, at least for me, my passion only grew as I got older, and you kind of can appreciate it more as an art form because you play more and more. One, because as you get older, you get more money for yourself. You're like, I can buy everything now. So you expose yourself to different, and I was a guy that always wanted to expose myself to different things and like own every console so I could play everything. So I kind of started developing that critical eye for it. And then especially because you grew up reading magazines and critics anyway. So you kind of say like, oh, they said this about this. All right, maybe that's something I should look out for. I don't know. Or I never thought to look out for this before until now. So by the time I got here, I was already there because I'd already just been doing it long enough. But yeah, I guess that definitely it hasn't changed like in terms of this doesn't feel like work. Like I feel like you can still just play games that I'm not like supposed to. Like if I just want to play this and enjoy it, like it's hard to shut off that critical part of my brain completely, even if I try. Like there's always gonna be in the back of your mind of like, that could be better, or you know what I mean. But I try not to let it dominate my thoughts, especially if it's just like this isn't supposed to be like game of the year level, like whatever. This is just some dumb thing that just appeals to my weird quirkiness or whatever. So yeah, I don't think it definitely hasn't destroyed it, which is good. I think that's the number one thing, right? It hasn't made me like I hate games now because it's all I do. And everything's work. So I'm happy for that. And it would take a lot to get there. I play so many games at all times and always have. So hasn't broken yet. Okay. Oh, can you give me 1 second, by the way? I just
Yeah, no worries.
check my phone. Right back.
Yeah, gotcha.
Okay.
You you okay on time?
Yeah. Sorry, my friends. I know I have a play date tonight. I told them that I was doing this. They haven't said anything, so I'm just gonna send a quick check. They're like, hey, still in the interview. No worries. It's no big deal. You're good.
Okay. I've just got two last questions, if that's good with you.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay.
Let me just send.
Yeah, whenever you're ready.
And Dan Tack is streaming as of now, apparently. Okay. Also.
Are there any particular challenges writing for like a magazine like Game Informer? Because that's something you don't see a whole lot of sites doing, is like running an actual printed magazine.
Yeah, that was the only really brand new thing, right? But that was the coolest part for me. Is like as much as I've written, I've never had anything in print, and one of my like bucket lists is to write a book one day. So like the first time I got like the issue of the magazine with like something I wrote, I was like, oh my god, like I'm on a page. I'm so used to being online. That's still cool, but like to have that novelty of like I'm turning like a few physical words and like that's my name on ink. I'm like, oh, that's cool, and that's more permanent in a way. So but like it's different because it's not quite the go of online where like you're producing content daily. Like the stuff in the magazine has a longer tail, and so it can be tricking balancing both. of like I got to work on this online feature that has to go up today or this week, while also trying to get this big magazine thing that might require interviews or whatever, and trying to time that to like, oh, this can be done in 2 weeks or whatever it is. So that's probably the most challenging thing. I've got it down at this point. It changes month to month too, right? Because your workload's never, it's always going to change depending on what we want to do. um we've we've actually when I started, we've actually changed the workflow to where GI is actually pretty much two different sides. Like there's an online side and a magazine side. They still intermingle. It's not like one doesn't do the other, but like the staff is almost in half, to where like I'm on the online side. So like my primary focus is online stuff, but I still write stuff for the magazine. It's just not as much as the magazine side, who will do most of the bigger, longer features that you'll see in the magazine, with some extent. Like I said, it's not a clean split at all. So that's worked out. Like we've been doing that a year now, and it's all I know, because like when I was brought in when I started, so I can't speak to what it was before that. But it's, everyone seems like cool with it. There were some growing pains for like the older writers that had to adjust to that. But for us newbies, we're like, okay, we can just start with this. But I'd say outside of like balancing both like kind of deadlines, it's not terribly different than online in terms of what it's required, outside of like, having to open up another piece of software that's for the magazine versus what you need for online and stuff like that. So it's cool though. I relished it. I was like, all right, another skill under my belt. It's like, hey, I work for a print magazine. That's cool. I know what it's like to work on a print thing.
And finally, is there anything you wish I would have asked that I didn't, or something like important you'd like to add?
Oh, that's an interesting question. It's like, why didn't you ask about my numerous awards? Did you not see the trophy wall behind me? You didn't ask about any of those. Oh wow, I don't know. That's a good question. I should steal that for my interviews.
I stole it from my professor, so
I mean, nothing's original, right? Everything's an iteration or a theft of something. I don't know. I think you did a great job. So I do interviews a lot too. So this is weird for me because I've never been interviewed before. But nothing I can think of. I think you covered a lot of good ground. I'm trying to think. Either like, even if you didn't ask something, I feel like I might have just gone on a tangent and answered it anyway. So I think you're good. I think you're good, dude.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your time, and thank you so much for the interview. It was really interesting, like I hoped it would be. So thanks.
Yeah, I hope so. I know I can go on tangents. I hope that was like, if you have to transcribe this, I apologize.
I don't, no worries. It's
that's great.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff to work with. So I thank you so much. Like genuinely, this was great.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much, and good. I hope I get you an A+. Something. You an F, and it's like, oh, I ruined this. I ended this man's whole career.
No worries.
But yeah, awesome, man. This was great.
Yeah. Thanks again. Yeah. I won't take up any more of your time, and just thank you again. It's been great.
Yeah, let me know how it turns out, I guess.
Sure. Okay. And is it okay if I email you if I have any like
follow-up
questions for like accuracy and that kind of stuff?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks.
No problem, man. Have a great night. Good luck.
You too. Thanks.
See ya.
See ya.